Hey, everyone. Welcome to Strange Stories, where we explore near-death experiences and supernatural stories from people who've had a glimpse of the other side. If you enjoy our content, please consider liking the video and subscribing to our channel. Without further ado, let's get to the story of the day.
I was exhausted after 3 months of nursing my father, who died in my arms. I was able to sleep better after that, and I was able to organize the funeral and accompanying activities. My mother had died earlier, so I was on my own. I could begin to relax physically after the final event. The burial and everything had been completed. I had an evening with my buddies 2 weeks later. We had a practice with our blues band. I was fatigued and dizzy when we arrived. I had to stay outdoors in the open while they went down to the cellar to the rehearsal area. I told my pals that I would catch up with them later, but things just grew worse. I began to lose strength. A headache began. Breathing became difficult. My mouth became absolutely dry, and there was a pressure in my head, as if it had been squeezed. Even though it wasn't cold, I was cold. I just kept getting tired of resting on a bench. As things worsened, I mustered all of my energy and went down to my pals, telling them that there was something really wrong with me. They noticed me, placed me in the car, and drove me to the nearest emergency doctor's office. There was a patient inside, but a friend of mine simply knocked on the door and said it was urgent. The doctor emerged from his office and took my blood pressure and pulse. Fearful, he threw my arm away, dashed into the surgery, and dialed 911 for immediate assistance. I'd been led into the room and was lying on a blanket-covered bed. I was quite ill, in pain, freezing, and experiencing all of the previously listed symptoms. I was vividly aware that I was dying as I lay there. It was like seeing things clearly. It wasn't at all frightening. In fact, exactly the opposite. I felt at ease, as if nothing was lacking from my life. Except for one thing. I had done well. It irritated me that I hadn't drafted a will yet, despite the fact that I had just inherited my father's house. It will be given to the state if there's no will. But that's no longer the case. I began to feel ecstatic and incredibly tranquil all at the same moment. Bliss, a kind of emotion I'd been longing for my entire life. My body began to sink, like if I were floating on the surface of a bath of water and the water was draining. It was obvious that I was dying. At the same time, I lost sensation throughout my body. There was no more ice, no headache, no problem breathing, no dizziness, just a very peaceful drifting on a surface, deeper and deeper. I watched the emergency doctors arrive in red uniforms, and I saw the ambulance's back door open. I was lying on the bed inside. Both doctors were working on both sides of my body. Outside, in front of the ambulance door, I noticed my pals. They stayed together, silently concerned about me. One of them drank from a bottle of wine mixed with Coke before passing it to our drummer. He came to the door, returned, and drank again and again. It carried on for quite some time. Suddenly, I felt a severe ache on my left arm, as if a needle had been stuck there. It was the first body sensation I'd felt in a long time. I returned. Although I was clearly dying at the time of the sinking, I had no idea I was dead or that anything would be different. Seeing my buddies outside the ambulance seemed natural. It was a routine part of my life. I was so focused on them that I couldn't see anything else, not my body, nor the physicians. I noticed my friend's concern and disbelief, as well as the drinking friend's perplexity, not knowing what to do or when to call an ambulance. He was supposed to accompany me to the hospital. I spent one night in intensive care, and physicians spent 2 weeks trying to figure out why. I was in a standard room. Nothing was discovered, except that my battery had run out of power. It was strange how my body safeguarded itself against that happening again for approximately a half year after that. I couldn't think of anything. It was really difficult for me to comprehend what I was reading. It took me a week to read and comprehend a single page. I was a journalist at the time, albeit I wasn't working. Even though I wasn't aware of what was happening or where I was, I didn't place much value on the experience. We had a talk with this drinking friend 2 years later, and I inadvertently recalled how he became drunk and couldn't stop drinking at the ambulance door while I was inside. I came to a halt when I said that. Something was off with it, I noticed. I was in the car, and I shouldn't have noticed what he was doing outside. So I remembered the event and began to recall dying, the end of my sickness feelings, losing my sense of body, but remaining aware otherwise. I wasn't sure when I reached to the other side, but I remembered the pain of the needle and returning. It was at that point that I realized what had happened and that I had died. The only specific number I know is the 60/20 blood pressure measured by the first doctor who summoned an ambulance. It was written on my hospital paper. When the nurse in the intensive care unit saw my blood pressure, she asked me how I was still alive after these readings. He was able to speak freely since my mood was ecstatic, friendly, and delightful. I had a sense of absolute freedom. Although I was out of my body for a brief time and didn't experience any spiritual enlightenment or clarity, something began to happen after a few months. It felt as if I had carried something from there that was gradually unfolding. When I woke up in the mornings, I had really distinct and unexpected thoughts just streaming through my head. Strange ones, things I'd never thought of before. Strange insights and realizations. For example, what humans are doing to the earth and our political system are both bad. They didn't give up. Every morning, my friend called, and I had to give her these fresh truths, which were just flowing. I just kept talking. She was concerned that I'd gone insane. I was also afraid at times, because these new insights were so different from how I had previously perceived the world from a material standpoint. I recall feeling a sense of support from a higher intelligence. Sometimes, I just picked a book off my shelf that I'd never read before, opened it up, read the page, and realized precisely what I was talking about. It was a book called Civilized Man's 8 Deadly Sins by Konrad Lorenz. I adored his animal-themed books. That's why I purchased this one as well, although I wasn't interested in it. It was simply waiting on my shelf. Simultaneously, I discovered an answer to a new query. Alternatively, a woman stood on the street hawking a specific political magazine. I'm not sure why, but I bought one. I read the editorial at home, and it had exactly my most recent ideas on what I was discussing with my friend. I saw others, professionals, before I truly went insane. I learned clever others had similar thoughts, so I could relax and not feel angry. The entire realization tale, on the other hand, was strange and unreal, and it took roughly 3 years to embrace. I also saw an increase in empathy. I can see people's feelings just by glancing at their expressions, even if they try to disguise them. It was novel and intriguing. Many of them are terrified to hear their secrets from me at first. I stopped informing them, but it became second nature to me with time. I can't tell the difference any longer. I only know about it because I remember when it was new, unusual, and intriguing, or I feel compelled to send a message or speak with someone about a specific topic without first asking them. How could you know that? I'm asked. It has recently become a source of concern for them. The true turning moment in my life was cancer, which was discovered 4 years after the encounter. But that is another story. I'm planning on writing a book about it. Following this spectacular death, I was not hesitant to follow the doctor's advice following this death sentence. I simply ignored conventional treatments. No surgery, chemotherapy, or anything else. I dared to listen to my heart without fear, which is the point, and recovered in 2 years by using solely natural treatments, discovering my inner healer, putting the puzzle pieces together, and eventually becoming a naturopath. My true message will be about cancer, dispelling the myths around this illness, which turned out to be the greatest blessing of my life. Thank you for your time.